Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome back to the Abundance Club podcast and happy new moon. This was unplanned, but turns out I am recording this right on the new moon here in Australia. Of course, that is no accident. I really love the energy of new moons, and I feel like this is going to tie in really nicely with this episode because what new moons bring this opportunity to start anew, to wipe the slate clean, to begin again. So it's got this real renewal sense about it. And what's interesting is something that I have been tuning into lately and really sensing with women around me, women in particular, but I'm sure this applies to men, but I just happen to have a lot of women in my circle and community and clients. It's this real threshold moment of change. It's this real feeling the urge to pivot, feeling the urge to change direction, maybe. And for some, that feels like the need to make radical change. That feels like this energy building within of, okay, I am done with that, like done with that old timeline, done with that way of operating. I know that there is more for me here. I know that there is a highest potential here that I'm leaning into, that I'm being invited to lean into. And it's like the track's changing. I've got that image of, when the train's coming along the train track, and then all of a sudden, the track changes and it changes the direction. It can keep going the way that it has been, or it can pivot and it can change direction. And that really feels like what's being initiated, what many are being initiated through at the moment. And these are changes, these are pivots that really honor their heart, that honor your heart over your head. We are moving out of a paradigm that has been ruled by logic and reason and intellect and this quiet sense of outsourcing our power. What does that mean? It means I believe you. I believe what is outside of me, whether that's through somebody else's voice, channel, opinion, strategy, over my own. And so each time we do that, we give our own power away. We give away our own authority. And we have done this for a long time. And what's really interesting about this time that we're in at the moment is that there's an uprising of our soul, there's an uprising of this innate knowing within us that has laid dormant for too long, that has been quiet for too long, while we prioritize our mind, the intellect, guidance coming from our mind. And I have said this again and again, and I don't feel like I can say it enough, really. Your mind is not here to guide you. Your mind is not here to lead you. That is not what it is designed for. And so what's happening is we are starting to realize, and that's what I want to speak to in this episode specifically, is there has been a trap that we have been unconsciously co-signing, which has been keeping us in this energy of stalling on our dreams, staying in the same job, staying in the same relationship, staying in the same circles, staying in that same level of income, because we've believed our mind, and our mind is always going to prioritize the familiarity over our expansion. And so we've chosen to believe our mind, even if we weren't conscious of it. And we've believed the doubts and the thoughts that have kept us in a limiting paradigm, in a paradigm that's been governed by logic and reason, the 3D paradigm. Now, why are we feeling this calling so strong all of a sudden to break out of that paradigm? Because if you are here and you are listening to this podcast and you resonate with my work, it is because you are here to anchor in the new paradigm that is upon us. We are shifting from 3D consciousness into a 5 dimensional, a fifth dimensional frequency, which means that we are moving out of that world that is governed by logic and probability, where we have allowed our mind and our ego to call the shots. And that is the trap that has kept us stalling, that's kept us on a timeline that we've actually outgrown. Our soul has outgrown, but it's felt almost too much, too scary, too big to listen to the impulses that are arising from within us, whether that's a voice from within, whether that's an innate knowing, whether that's a feeling sense. It's like, who am I to trust in that? Because we have not learned how to trust in that. And so we might feel this wave of inspiration, this nudge, this knowing, this impulse. And we all feel that because we all have these innate faculties within us, because we are all souls, first and foremost, that are having this human experience. But the whole purpose of that is to forget so that we remember, that we're actually creators. That's what we do. That's who, it's not what we do, it's who we are. It's who we are. And by understanding that, that is our nature. That is what we're here for. That is what we're here to experience ourselves as limited, unlimited souls in a limited paradigm. Wow, what a task. What a task. So, why is it then that we continue to negotiate, we continue to try and convince a part of us that believes in limitation and separation, that believes that this limited paradigm is all that there is? And so, the only way for me to achieve financial abundance is for me to work hard and to strive and to put in more hours and to wait for a pay rise and to wait to be acknowledged or validated, or the only way that I can be in this loving romantic partnership and relationship is if I settle for these other things, is as if I lose a part of myself, right? That kind of bargaining, right? We're bargaining and we're negotiating with our limitation. We are not meant to do that. Because when you do that, you're trying to convince a part of you that is talking yourself out of going after your dreams. That's the ego part that likes to edge God out. And we spend so much time. And I was walking today, and I've been doing these beautiful nature walks lately, but consciously connecting. I feel like connecting isn't even a big enough word to describe it. Sometimes it's hard to put our language to the experiences that we have, but I'm basically walking with the divine, calling in more of that aspect of me to lead. And, I'm about to lead this phenomenal container this week with a group of women in soul power. And when I say it feels bigger than anything that I have led before, and it feels so God led, so divinely led. It's like my team, the divine, is saying, "We've got this. We are holding you in this, and you are the channel and the conduit for that." And that feels incredibly humbling, and it feels incredibly expansive. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to lead these women, because I know that they are coming out on the other side of this as a completely different version of themselves. And I'm going to talk more about this version of ourselves and why this work is so, so powerful. And it will change your life. It will literally shift you onto a new paradigm. And this is why this invitation feels so strong. And if you know, you feel it in yourself, it can feel almost scary and confronting, because you're going to a paradigm that you haven't been before, where you are creating on autopilot because you are creating alongside the divine. So as I was walking today, I was able to observe myself when I was going into the mind, right? So if our divinity is the truth, is the only truth that is, that we are a soul, that we are one with God, that we have this God consciousness within us, If that is the truth of who we are, then everything else that is an illusion. The negotiating, the limiting, the limitation, the limiting thoughts, the protests, the fears, the doubts, the worry, all of that comes under the umbrella of the limited or separate self. And for many of us, that's where we operate from day in, day out. We are not going to be able to anchor in a new timeline in this new paradigm where we are being led by our limitless self if we don't know how to let go and untether from that conditioning. So as I'm walking, I was feeling the ways that I would start to negotiate with the mind and the limitation. And it's like spirit was pulling me up on it straight away and saying, come back here, come back to what's truth. And I can see how it's so easy to get pulled into that. And many of us operate from that unconsciously because we're so used to it, because it's in our conditioning. When you have an experience of tapping into your divine nature, allowing more light in, bringing in more of the God consciousness, when you have an experience of being able to do that, you start to look at this part of you in a whole new way. You start to really become aware and notice when you're pulling yourself under or when you're letting yourself be pulled under by your old conditioning, by the lack thoughts, by the limitation. And you get really good at noticing that and choosing again. And my friends, it's that choosing again is how we quantum leap moment to moment. I am dedicating myself to 3 months with these women because I know it takes conscious awareness and devotion day in and day out, week in and week out, to continue to choose as your highest self, to continue to move and make choices as the version of you that knows, I know who I am. I know that I'm unlimited. I know that everything's available to us, to me, right? And we start to let go of the part of us that believes in its inadequacies. It believes in limitation. It believes that it's not enough. It believes that it needs to convince others. So, one of the things that I want to say around this, getting back to this stalling energy and the trap that keeps us in that stalling energy, is that we spend so much of the time believing our thoughts over trusting our energy. And again, we haven't learned how to trust our energy. And this is why embodiment is so important, because even a lot of spiritual teachings can move you into an energy of bypassing, of bringing you out of your body, of feeling like you need to somehow ascend out of your body. The way that we are ascending in this paradigm is going more into our body, trusting in our body, feeling the impulses that move through you, feeling the way that spirit and life is communicating through you. This is a shift from life is happening to me. I'm in victim consciousness and very much in that 3D paradigm. I'm just at the mercy, at the effect of life. Two, life is happening for me. I'm starting to be aware that, hang on, I'm a conscious co creator. Great. But where I'm interested in taking people, those that are ready, is actually shifting even more into life is happening through me, through my embodiment. So we're not bypassing, we're not externalizing our guidance and our power and our intuition. I did that for a really long time. Last year schooled me in that big time where I had to come back even deeper and go, it's moving through me. I can trust what I feel. I can trust what I know. We need to stop making our mind our master. We need to stop giving it the praise that we have. And we need to start becoming the master of our own ship and seeing the mind as our servant, not the other way around. Your absolute power, your power to be a conscious co creator in this life completely lies within you. Everything that you seek lies within you. You have access to that now through your embodiment and through this distinct way that you connect back to your power and you live and lead as that. So, the invitation of this time is, can you trust yourself enough to feel that intuitive impulse that's alive within you, that's your connection to life, to spirit, to the divine? Can you trust in your dreams that are actually guiding you in the way that spirit is inviting you to feel good? That is your purpose, right? And this, all of this work ties back into you allowing yourself to become or to meet and to live as the version of you who naturally attracts the life that you want because you are in coherence with it. And in the program, you become that coherent signal. When you get on the frequency of what it is that you desire, it has to find you. That is law. But that reality, that external reality, will only change, will only shift when you do. Consuming information, reading books, listening to podcasts is going to help you on the level of the intellect. It's the information consumption. But I can't stress this enough. Unless that knowledge is embodied and lived, the change is not going to happen because we don't change at the level of the mind and the intellect alone. That's only part of it. When we shift our energy at the level of our embodiment, which is our frequency, that is when reality catches up to meet that clear and coherent signal. So we have to be willing to show up as the version of ourselves, even when the conscious or unconscious fears and doubts and resistance are present, because they are still going to be here. And if you are waiting for that to change, for there to be less worry, less doubt, less fear, often that is amplified when you're on this precipice of change, when you're on the precipice of expansion. Often there's an amplification of that. Why? Because the limited part of you, the small self or the not self, senses that you are about to change, and so it gets louder. We have to be willing to see ourselves. And I really want you to hear this. We have to be willing to see ourselves through the eyes of the divine and not through the lens of our conditioning. I see this with women in my sessions, those in my mentoring over and over again, that are seeing themselves and their self-concept, creating their self-concept through the lens of their conditioning. And our conditioning or our ego self is always going to tell us that we need more healing, that we need to clear more limiting beliefs, that we need to read more books, that we need to listen to more podcasts, that we need to do all the things to distract us, to take us away from the true power that lies within you. When you tap into that power, you need less of that. Why? Because all that you need comes from the divine. All that you need comes through you from source, through your soul. This is what soul power is. When I started teaching yoga, this was about 2008. Is that 16 years ago? No, even more. 17, 18 years ago when I started teaching yoga, and I was only 28, 27 or 28. So I was young. I'm still young, but I was younger when I started doing that. I had to decide, and I'd been working with the laws of the universe and manifestation since I was about 16 or 17. So I had seen the way that it had worked for me. And I brought that into this. I had to decide, and I had to embody the version of me who was already a successful, highly recognized yoga teacher, highly experienced yoga teacher, before I had any evidence of that. I was fresh out of training. I was going in to teach my first corporate class. My first ever class was corporate. Did I go in there as the version of me who was doing their first class, who was nervous, who was green, fresh out of yoga school, teaching all these people in corporate Brisbane? Did I do that? No, hell no. I had to choose the identity that I was walking in there as. I had to lean into that and be the energy of that. So when I started teaching, I embodied that identity right from the get go, even as a brand new teacher. What I did in that moment is I decided to believe in the potential over the proof. I decided to believe in my becoming as if it was already so right now, as if I was the living, breathing embodiment of that now before, like without any evidence. Let this be a lesson if you're someone that's in that void and you're waiting for the evidence in order to feel enough. You're waiting for the clients, you're waiting for the validation of on social media, or you're waiting for a certain number of dollars in your bank in order for you to feel well worthy or that you've made it or that you're enough. When we feel like that, we're always going to be delaying it. We're always, because it's never going to feel enough because we're coming from the limited self, we're coming from the ego self. So I connected to a version of myself in that moment, 5 or 10 years down the track, the future me. And I took on her energy, her beliefs, her self concept. I stood as her, I walked as her, I spoke as her, even though there was a part of me that didn't believe that, right? There was a part of me that was saying, I'm too young, I'm inexperienced, I'm a new teacher, I don't know enough, I'm not ready. Yes, I had all of those thoughts, but I chose to not make them my master. I chose not to believe them. If I let that part of me lead, I would not have gone on to be a sought after yoga teacher, to create a large yoga brand with multiple studio locations from scratch, to run a successful sought after teacher training year and year and year, to run amazing retreats around the world in Australia. So I wouldn't have gone on to do that. And I honestly believe that that was how that path unfolded. That's how it became inevitable because I decided right from the beginning before there was evidence, even when there was fear, doubt, and a level of disbelief. Right? So I chose that timeline. I chose to embody that timeline, even when it seemed out of reach. And I have manifested everything in my life by choosing possibility over probability, things that did not make logical sense, things that seemingly appeared out of nowhere. But I know now that there was a part of me, there is a part of you, which is your soul aspect that is working behind the scenes. The God aspect of you is working behind the scenes, and you are only seeing a tiny little piece of this. You are only seeing less than 1% of reality with your five senses, but you're believing that over the rest that is in the unseen, subtle realm that you're co creating in. The probability and the logic comes from the ego self who identifies with that logic and reason and separation. When we enter new paradigm, the new paradigm, when we anchor in that template, we are doing so from soul. The soul doesn't believe in logic and probability because it exists beyond the 3D. So the question is, are you ready? Are you ready to tap into that, to be led by that aspect of you, which is actually your divinity, which is actually the truth of who you are, over what your mind, your small mind, might tell you is possible based on all that it can see and know, which is usually based on the past or a projection of its fears and doubts and worries, and based on what is probable within this realm. When we are finally willing to set that down, and this is where it gets really exciting, and I see this time and time again with women. When you're finally willing to set that down, and men, and when you're finally willing to release the limited identity and come back to what you know to be true in your heart, because you know you have, my friends, the answers within you. It's just that they exist right now on a different frequency. You get to choose that frequency, that timeline, by what you are choosing to believe, by what you're choosing to think, by how you're choosing to feel. That's not out in the future. That's available to you right now, and you can change that in a moment and another moment and another moment. And when those moments keep stacking on top of each other, which is what we do in soul power, when those moments keep stacking on top of each other, suddenly you are on a new timeline. And suddenly you look around and you go, it's happening. I'm here. The evidence is starting to come through. The synchronicities are starting to align, seemingly out of nowhere, but it is not out of nowhere. Your energy has magnetized that in. When we're willing to set down the limitation, the logic, the probability, the reason, all the ways our mind is telling us it's not possible, when we're actually brave enough to set that down and to start to trust the knowing we have in our heart, that's when we are finally breaking out of that paradigm that's kept us stalling and breaking out of our conditioning. And that's when we not only make ourselves available for our highest timeline, we are walking it, we are living it, we are breathing it. And that is so exciting, so incredibly exciting. And so, coming back to these pivots that you're feeling, what I want to remind you is you can trust in that, trust in the way that you're being led. Everything is here for you, showing you and guiding you forward. What if you were to let it excite you? What if you were to work with that energy, welcome it in, invite it in every day, dialogue with it? And if you want an incredible portal to support you with this so that you finally anchor this in, come into Soul Power. There's a few more days to join. And even if you happen to listen to this podcast after we have had our first call, reach out to me, because I want the women to be in this portal that are ready for it, that are finally ready to stop bouncing between the knowing and the conditioning, stop bouncing between the potential and the probability, and start finally living as who they came here to be, because you've chosen this. And maybe you've chosen to listen to this at this time and to be reminded. And if this activates something in you, what would it be like for you to trust that and to make that move even without the evidence? Because that is how spirit works with you. When you make that move and you decide from the energy of the one who is successful, who is lovable, who is confident, who is decisive, who is abundant, you watch what moves in your favor. The money appears, the opportunity comes in, the signs and the synchronicity. What is more important than any of the manifestations that come from this? And they will come from this, because that's inevitable. But what you find is more important, more of a takeaway than ever before, and I get this reflected back to me, is how people feel. How it feels to actually move as her, live as her. It doesn't feel good to let ourselves believe in a limitation, over trusting in our heart. It doesn't feel good. And you can feel that in your body. It's contractive. You can feel a little flat. And it's like, I don't know if I can quite trust this knowing inside of me. Let this be a takeaway from today, is that you can trust it. It's there for you. And what's on the other side of that is the manifestation, is the feeling of being so tapped in, so in attunement with who you came here to be and your highest timeline. And what it means from there is whatever you meet in life, you know it's part of the divine unfolding and you trust it. And most importantly, you trust yourself. So wherever you are, I really hope this meets you and speaks to you and calls you into a place of deep trust and faith. Faith moves mountains, and that certainty that you feel in who you are when you trust yourself creates miracles. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with one people, one person. I would love it if you could share it with one person. Please make sure that you are subscribed to my channel or following along for more abundance. I have this intention in the words that I speak that it sends ripples of abundance out to everyone that listens. I pray over this that all of you, each and every one of you that hear this podcast, that hear the words, that feel the transmission, are activated in some way and that you experience incredible blessings in your life. I appreciate you sharing this. I appreciate a rate or a review on this podcast. This helps to keep the transmission alive. And most importantly, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here.